Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. I am joined, as always, by the indisputable Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Oh, I'm indisputable, am I? I mean, I would I would at least have expected to be indubitable, but
I
I'm
mean,
indisputable. Well, there you go.
What you don't realise is, whenever I introduce you, I realise that I have to put a moniker before your name, and then I'm caught on the spot where I have like half a second to come up with a word, and I just get running through all the things.
It kind of almost reminds me of that, sort of when you see films of the Napoleonic era, or sort of read books, Hornblower books, things like that. That how the Spanish king had that moniker, His Most Catholic Majesty.
Right.
It was most likely because of that the British then decided, oh well, we need a moniker too. So so our king then became His Most Britannic Majesty. So it was, whenever you sort of hear these diplomatic exchanges, when perhaps sort of an English captain has to speak to either the French or the Portuguese or the Spaniards or whatever, he will always say that he is here on behalf of His Most Britannic Majesty's Navy.
Marvelous.
Which I think is always so yeah. If you can build
it's
in
a bit
Britannic,
self-serving, but it's properly grandiose. Isn't it?
So if you can build in Most Britannic in the next introduction, I will definitely I will approve.
Do you know what? I like the fact that we effectively invented a term that we then made a compliment just by nature of us being us.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to my being described as the most Britannic YouTuber.
Of course. I'm never going to call you that, just for reference. But we were talking.
I think more than likely the chat will be seriously disappointed at that. I think you're letting the side down here.
I mean, the most Britannic Britisher. I mean, it's like I might call you the Titanic Britisher because you have a tendency to split in half and crash into icebergs.
So I tend to sort of hit the iceberg and then sink gradually while rearranging the deck chairs. Yes,
indeed. Whilst the band continues to play. So there you go. People are now complaining that we're early.
Please forgive us.
I just like to subvert people's expectations. You know how it is. But we were discussing films before the stream happened, and I thought we'd open with the general conversation we were having.
You actually suggested that we might talk about a certain thing before Great Uncle Bulgaria arrived, but he's beaten us to it.
Oh, he's fine. Good evening, Tailed. How are you doing?
Hello. How's it going?
So welcome. I don't have something to describe you because naturally you're 1 minute late, and that's unforgivable.
Oh, you were 3 minutes early starting, so.
How would you know? How did you know?
Is there actually a grandiloquent way of saying Scottish?
If there is, I've yet to hear it.
Something like Ecossian or something like that.
Ecossian, Alabanach,
Haggisian.
I'm just the Scottish. I remember. I'm just the cheap knockoff version of yourself.
I can live with that. Yes.
To be fair.
We were talking about before the stream started, Tailed. We were talking about films. Where did we start? Oh yes, we were talking about Blues Brothers.
We hit on the Blues Brothers,
and we had never seen the 2000 remake.
Had no interest in it whatsoever.
Because the first version was definitive, and this led the Britisher on naturally to exclaim that only the first 3 Star Wars films are canon. Because as soon as George Lucas turned his eye to the prequels, it all went out the. Through the bed with the bathwater.
I just wish to point out that I did not express myself in quite such a nerdy fashion. I did not refer to canon or any such thing. I just basically said I couldn't be bothered with the others. Because as far as I was concerned, yeah, you've made 3 films. That seems okay. Now you're giving us prequels trying to explain things about which went before. I don't care. Go away.
I find it funny because, as I've gotten older, I've appreciated the original trilogy more and more and more, and yet I grew up with the prequels and I adored them as a child. So
what you were saying is not much has changed. Already as a child, you were wrong.
I'm not the academic agent, Britisher. I really am not. So don't compare me to him.
Well, I mean, you were wrong. That doesn't mean you're as bad. You're as badly wrong as the academic agent with wrestling and rap music. I mean, that's unforgivable. You were just wrong.
He's just a pure degenerate, isn't he? I mean, really. What's your opinion on episodes 1 to 3 of Star Wars Tales? And if you say I haven't seen them, then the Britisher will bless you and I will curse you.
I haven't seen them.
Bless you, my child.
Damn it. Have you not seen any of the Star Wars?
No, none of them.
None at all.
No, I haven't seen the Blues Brothers film either.
Ooh.
It's a fun movie, I must say. The Blues Brothers film is a very fun movie. You kind of just have to sort of switch off common sense and just let it sort of wash over you. It's really enjoyable.
The whole point of the Blues Brothers is it goes completely insane. It's a cameo a minute from great blues legends, but also it's they're on a mission from God, so nothing phases them at all. They claim they're on a mission from God, so all sorts of stuff happens. Like one of their exes gets a bazooka and blows down a building.
That actually is Carrie Fisher from Star Wars. Yes, Princess Leia.
It is, and knocks the building down, and they just get up and they go, "We're on a mission from God," so they can't phase them, and they just carry on. But it's some great music, and it's a stupid story, but it's a great story. It's good fun. People in chat, which I've been neglecting until now. So hello, chat. We've got all the regulars: Silly Sailor, Dr. Martin Luther Pepe, Up Yours, Staff Sergeant Snipers actually managed to make it to a stream this week, which is lovely to see. And people saying they all agree with you on Star Wars Britisher. So there you go. There's that. And
well, I mean, why would they not agree with me? I mean, I don't know why you're pointing that out. I just took that for granted.
So there's that side of things. And what was I going to see here? Yes, both Star Wars and the Blues Brothers have Carrie Fisher. Marvelous. But no, I was just thinking about how, like, Star Wars is a film I kind of loved. It's like a guilty pleasure. Like, I know I should hate it, but I like it too much. As opposed to the new Star Wars films, which I've decided I'm not going to see the last one of, at least not in a traditional cinema-going sense, because the last film completely killed any interest that I had in it. Unfortunately, and Disney's not going to get a penny from me. So there you go.
Well, I think generally you have got the problem of this sort of franchise mania having taken over. And
the latest trailer for the latest one dropped, and they're bringing back Palpatine. That's how
that's how desperate they are.
They're bringing back the Emperor. Like, sorry for anyone who's there, unless they subvert our expectations with that one. It's unfortunately going to happen. It's just a bastardization.
Well, I just find it funny how when it comes to these films, as I say, this franchise mania that's taken over, how do we say, the people who are so ardently defending it all tend to be of a certain age, i.e. a lot younger than me. And if there are any people who are my age, it is these complete comic book nerds. If you know what I mean, who basically see all their dreams come true.
The countryside is replete with 50-year-old comic book nerds.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I mean, rubber exists, so what can I say?
But I just look at it and I just go, I'm sorry, is any of this worth a film? I mean, just recently, I think it was somewhere in the last 1 or 2 days, I saw that they were kind of advertising that Hellboy is back again.
Oh, and it's been absolutely destroyed.
And you just go,
destroyed.
I'm sorry, but I saw the first one, and I don't think I was paying attention anymore by the end of the film. I mean,
okay.
I don't know how many sequels they've made since, but please, for the love of God, let go.
I mean, speaking of Hellboy, there were only 2 films. The first one was great. The second one was not so great. It didn't get a sequel to that, and they've rebooted it, and the reboot is awful.
So the first one that was great was already the one where I was losing the will to live by the end of it.
You were not the target audience, clearly, Britisher.
Yes, so it would appear, yes.
But there we go. Yes. Right. So obviously, in the last hour or so, we've had the I was gonna like make a light and say the delight, but the tragic news that Notre Dame is on fire. Very unfortunate, and thankfully it seems like firefighters are managing to get there. However, like obviously the internet is ablaze with who on earth did this and how and all sorts. The best conspiracy theorist I've heard so far, it has said that Macron, who is obviously set to address the French people about the Gilets jaunes.
Oh, he's basically torched his own cathedral in order to distract from that. Yeah.
To prevent himself from having to give this speech. It's 850 years old. What a waste. 850, like how many buildings last 850 years? And yes, he's going on. It's still burning. There's some horrendous imagery.
Well, I mean, you know, what you have to consider is you've got massive oak beams holding the whole thing up.
Mm.
So this will be some sort of, you know, beams kind of that sort of balance each other and whatever. So you will have a hell of a lot of woodwork up there. It's longer than a football pitch, the whole cathedral.
Yes, I'm trying to find.
You know, just try and imagine how much tonnage of wood is up there. So when that falls, it goes. It basically goes through the vaulted ceiling. The vaulted ceiling won't be able to withstand that. It just smashes right through the vaulted ceiling and then goes down onto the floor. Of course, once it's then on the floor of the cathedral, these are now beams that are already alight, and now okay, there's some stone intermixed with it, but as such, it then forms one giant bonfire.
Yes.
So you've got just tonnage after tonnage of burning tinder dry oak beams. And yes, I mean, there's very little way of putting that out. So when you see the water hoses shooting water, largely what they're trying to do is cool the whole area rather than try to put the fire out. So what they will be trying to do is prevent the heat from building up too much, because in some places I've been told, or I heard on the news, some of the windows have melted. So these are stained glass windows, which will be hundreds of years old. So you try to prevent things like that. Also, of course, if the heat becomes too big, too incredible, you would have heat that would be enough to crack stone, if you know what I mean. So chances are they're just cooling the whole structure with it rather than trying to put the fire out.
Yeah, a spokesman for the cathedral has said the whole structure is burning. There's going to be nothing left. It remains to be seen whether the vault which protects the cathedral will be affected or not.
Well, I mean, it isn't as if you won't have anything left. I mean, the stone will not burn.
Well, one would hope not.
The stone should be fairly self-supporting.
We'd have to get a certain degree more, it would have to get a certain degree more hotter. Shall we say?
I mean, the one thing that the one thing you have a problem with now is that you will have the building becoming unstable towards the inside, because I mean, the flying buttresses, they hold the walls up from the weight of the whole roof bearing down on it. The problem is that the roof pushes the walls outward. That's why you have the flying buttresses, to keep the walls in. But now that the pressure is removed from pushing the walls outward, there is the chance of the walls falling in inwardly. I mean, that was, I don't know if you heard it. I believe Trump said something about possibly,
so horrible to watch.
using
the massive-
helicopters or
He
planes to drop water on it.
He said, so horrible to watch the massive fire at Notre Dame Cathedral. Perhaps flying water tankers could be used to put it out.
Yes,
quickly.
as I say, that was picked up. That went quite wild on social media. Now, first off, you have to understand that all the water tankers used to put out forest fires and brush fires and things like that will be at the Mediterranean coast.
Yes,
so they'll be quite a way away from Paris. But even if you had them, this is what I mean. When you think of the structure now no longer being absolutely solid, if you drop water onto it, you are not just dropping something on to put the fire out. You are dropping a significant tonnage onto the building that will not smash into the building in a straight vertical way. So you might start taking the walls out that way. So therefore, that isn't really
No, it's not viable.
Yeah.
The if you can see here from where I'm sharing things, we've lost parapet already. It's gone.
Well, at one point we had some from looking from that end, in the right tower you could see some flames. I'm assuming that could be because there might be some, wooden staircases or something like that.
I presume the whole thing's good.
Well, I mean, I would be surprised. I would have assumed there to be stone steps in there, but I could imagine that perhaps some framework holding up bells or possibly some steps in the tower in the higher areas might be wood. That would be the only way I could explain it, because you could see through those sort of great windows there in the tower. That's where you can see the hose is shooting water in there. In that tower you could see there was burning, and you just sort of wonder what was going on in there exactly.
Well, clearly an after-party rave.
Yeah,
but this is where Tailed leans in and goes, "I've never seen Notre Dame."
Not in real life, I haven't. No.
Well, here's my story about Notre Dame. The one time I went to Paris, I got there and there was a heat wave.
Okay.
And so basically we are talking 40 centigrade. So we're talking a proper heat wave. And that
no
was
wonder
then...
the Muslims like it.
Sorry?
No wonder the Muslims like it if it gets to 40.
Well, I mean, it was the sort of thing that melts Scotsmen. Let's put it like that.
Well, to be fair, my desk lamp is melting me a little bit already.
So not only, I mean, you would have thought, well, that was unfortunate, got a heat wave on, but it was combined with something else. And that was unbeknownst to me. At the same time as I got there, the Pope arrived for a visit for a few days, in which on some weekend he was then going to do a kind of great mass. Not in Notre Dame, somewhere outside of Paris. The problem is when the Pope goes to a place like that, it isn't as if he just goes there and then the local faithful go to his event and then they leave. No. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pilgrims will gather in the place he has gone to from all across Europe and possibly the world. So every single Parisian landmark was absolutely swamped with these pilgrims queuing. And this in the middle of a 40-degree heat wave. It may not come as a surprise to you that I therefore was perhaps one of the few people who ever visited Paris who didn't get to see the Louvre, didn't get to go on the Eiffel Tower, and didn't get into Notre Dame.
I mean, you were there when they were built, Britisher, so I suppose...
Well, there is that, yes. That there was that compensation, yes.
Yes.
It's interesting as such that the whole place is called Paris, because the tribe at the time when the when the Romans took the place over, when they were conquering.
Time of your visit.
Yeah, precisely.
The British
The tribe were called the Parisii. So effectively, the place is still named after the ancient tribe that was there. And they lived, the town at the time, I think Lutetia was what it was called, they were on that very island. So it's highly likely that in the place of Notre Dame will more than likely have been the temple to the Celtic gods. We know that later it was supplanted by a Roman temple. So effectively, the original Christian church was there in the place of the Roman temple, and then eventually that was replaced by Notre Dame. So that place is more than likely a place of worship since time immemorial. As far as you can go back in recorded history, there was a place of worship at Notre Dame. So it kind of gives you an idea of sort of the age and how much that place is kind of connected with the thing itself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to run through a couple of super chats. So Silly Sailor has said for £5, on fire is the default condition of France. There's a reason they're up to their 5th republic. Thank you, Silly Sailor. And Joel Kelly has donated £2 and says, wooden beams can't melt stone dreams. I mean, yeah, okay. I've never actually visited Notre Dame, but now I feel a little bit gutted. Paris is one of those places actually I haven't been. I've been most of Europe. I've been to most of Europe, but I've not actually done much of France. I've driven through France on my way to Belgium, but other than that, I just think it's such a shame to.
So you decided on having the choice between France and Belgium. It would be Belgium you would be heading to, and you would just leave France aside. Yeah,
I have family in Belgium. That's my excuse.
I've only been to France once, and I was there for about 12 hours.
Well, I mean, that was more than likely for the negotiations with the French government of them trying to get you to stage a rebellion against Britain in Scotland, right?
Yes, that was the convenience of the old alliance.
Okay.
Went through the Channel Tunnel.
Okay, so I'm gonna move us on just because I don't think there's that much to talk about regarding this, but it's there is some news surrounding Shamima Begum. So she's been granted legal aid to fight her citizenry case. I can't remember. Remind me, Britcher, where did you come down on her having her citizenship removed?
Well, I mean, as such, we know you can't render someone stateless.
Yeah.
As such, the reason which the British government used to basically take her citizenship away from her sounded legitimate to me. It may in fact be the Bangladeshi government that is kind of, playing fast and loose. But one of the questions, I guess, which one will need to answer in her sort of trial, so to speak, if she's getting legal aid of sorts, will be whether you can take away someone's nationality if they only have a theoretical right to another nationality without ever having exercised it.
Would you call it somewhat of a right?
Well, as I don't know. I don't know what the sort of finer points will be in that regard, and what we'll need to consider.
I'm sorry, it's just you can't see chat, can you?
No, I'm not. I'm not looking.
There are listeners attempting to play Dominic's somewhat game. We need to call 999 now.
But as I say, when it comes to that sort of problem, I can see why one might have to test this, because this does seem like a sort of legal first, and we need to kind of work out, hang on a moment, how does this actually work? And therefore, to have it examined from all angles, I think, is more than likely not a bad idea.
Indeed. So
It's easy for people to sort of say, well, but this is Shamima Begum, she's the terrorist bride who left. But at the same time, this is a good test. Should there be, ever a British citizen who is anyway in the sort of Julian Assange mode, or, the Tommy Robinsons of this world and whatever, we need to know what the situation is regarding stripping undesirables of their nationality. And therefore, I don't have a big problem with her getting legal aid.
It's obviously the biggest issue with her whole case is that we can't recognize the state she defected to.
Yes, precisely.
So we know all that. So if I share my screen now, it should become readily apparent why I'm bringing all of this up. So here we are. So legal aid has been granted for Shamima Begum, who joined the Islamic State at age 15. She's now 19. Her family has said it plans to challenge the decision. So Jeremy Hunt said the legal aid agency's decision to assist her made him personally very uncomfortable. He added, however, that we believe that the UK is a country that people with limited means should have access to the resources of the state if they want to challenge decisions the state's made about them. Legal aid is financial assistance provided by the taxpayer to those unable to afford legal representation themselves, whether they're accused of something or a victim who seeks the help of a lawyer through the court process. It's means tested and its availability has been cut back significantly in recent years. So here we go. So this is a funny one for her because, of course, a lot of the evidence against her is held by MI5, I think it is. And the legal aid that's been granted has to cover a case that goes before the semi-secret Special Immigrations Appeals Commission, which adjudicates on cases where the Home Secretary has stripped someone of their nationality on grounds of national security. It's a really complicated legal challenge. So here we go. So it's a complex combination of MI5 intelligence reports, which cannot be disclosed to the complainant, and long-standing law on achieving a fair hearing. Now, I'm not sure why they can't be disclosed to the complainant, although I understand why they can't be disclosed to a jury. I think telling her
what exactly can't be disclosed to the complainant? Sorry.
MI5 intelligence reports. So
okay, yes, but it may mean that through the report, one could identify who is the source.
It's true. Yes.
And given that there has been in the last few days apparently some revelations suggesting that she was not quite as innocent.
Oh, yes, we'll get onto that. No worries.
But what I mean is that those sort of things might give an indication as to who it was who was being the source at the base of those reports. So,
sure.
That's why one might not wish to have the accused see them.
Yes. So we've got this whole thing. We were offering her legal aid, that sort of thing. But this particular BBC article mentions very little. This came out actually today. So obviously this is just a general idea.
Well,
excuse me.
As I say, I would just like to point out that I think that it to my mind this is not just about her. To my mind, there is a significant public interest in the legal situation of a person.
Yes,
like that to be actually resolved, so that we know, what the situation is, not just regarding her, but regarding any of us, if you know what I mean.
To me, it's simple. It's because of the nature of ISIS, the fact that you're fighting them, that they're like a non-governmental. You might describe them as like a non-governmental organization. But I mean, to my mind, it would be very easy to say that membership of this organization precludes you from citizenship. But
yes,
at the same
I know.
time,
What I'm trying to get at is, what if Tommy Robinson is on holiday, so he's out of the country, and then the British government resolve that he is from now on to be seen as an undesirable person. They don't want him anymore, and because of his Irish heredity, they believe he has got the right to an Irish passport, so they're withdrawing his British one.
Yes, I don't think, I think that she should be brought back to face justice. I don't think that stripping her of her citizenship does anything like natural.
So I think, that's the way I see it. I think there are some genuine sort of angles that need to be explored to actually sort of put it into law and to kind of solidify the practice, so to speak, because this is a complete first. We've not really come across this kind of thing, and we may in fact have come across it, but it's been done in the quiet with some of the other ISIS fighters.
If you really want to get around this in a general way, bring back the death penalty, lie to her, bring her back, and then execute her. We could just get rid of the problem that way, British. It'd be as simple as that.
I see you're thinking in a very straightforward manner there.
Oh, of course, yeah. As simple as it can be. There's no way that could possibly be abused.
I mean, there's no way anybody would misuse that. It's unimaginable that the Yvette Coopers and the other Remainers of the world would just get together and decide to thereby get rid of all the Brexiteers who are a minority in Parliament in that manner.
Brexiteers are a threat to national cohesion. Let us remove them. Yeah, it would never be used. I don't see why we. It's such a political thing not to recognize Islamic State as what it is, which is a group of insurgents who've taken over an area. You recognize them as a state, therefore it's something that people can defect to, and therefore she's guilty of treason anyway, seeing as they're an enemy combatant state. And then what you do is you can then, it doesn't change anything regards policy. It also doesn't change anything.
Well, one of the questions, for example, would also be what the Syrian state has to say in this. Because if you think of it, if we were to have recognized the Islamic State, then the Islamic State is no more. It's now effectively being taken over by Syria, or by the Kurds, who are technically not recognized and therefore still on Syrian territory. So what would be Assad's opinion about her? Would he actually be willing to accept that person as a citizen?
Well, it wouldn't be. In the case of if you gave it all over to Syria, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because the Middle East in general is a bunch of arbitrary lines that we drew, even as recently as the 80s. So it's.
Well, yes, but in all fairness, I don't think we can say that there's much fighting really going on about the boundaries in the Middle East, other than when it comes to the great kind of Middle Eastern sort of conundrum that is Israel and the Palestinians.
Because they're trying to eke out an existence rather than.
Yeah, because I think everybody else, I think they've kind of settled down by now on those boundaries. They might technically dispute them, but I can't really see, Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, going to war with each other over, whether the boundary is here or 200 yards further to the west.
Anyway, so we've discussed a lot of this previously, but what I really wanted to talk about was because obviously, for goodness sake, Sajid Javid, right? He got a lot of stick for stripping her of her citizenship. I can't remember who it was who said that it was that the UK was then complicit in the death of her baby and stuff like that, afterwards by this.
I think that was Diane Abbott who was holding speeches to that extent.
And right, so, but the thing is this article came out from The Independent. So Shamima Begum was member of feared ISIS morality police in Syria. Now this is, as far as I'm aware, unsubstantiated. It's from a number of sources, but it's not confirmed. We haven't collected our own evidence, etc. But Basically, she claimed she was only a housewife during the time she lived with ISIS, but according to a report in the Sunday Telegraph, she played a much more active role as a member of the Hizbah, which metes out punishment to those found flouting ISIS laws on dress and behavioral standards. One activist quoted by the newspaper said Begum had been seen holding an automatic weapon, so an AK or something, shouting at Syrian women in the city of Raqqa for wearing brightly colored shoes. Members of our group from Raqqa knew her well, said an activist who founded an anti-ISIS collective, who published information about ISIS crimes from sources on the ground. There were lots of young European women in this Hizbah. Some of them were very harsh, and the local population was very scared. There are separate allegations that she stitched suicide bombers into explosive vests so that they could not be removed without the vests themselves detonating. So if you've got someone who gets cold feet, shall we say, they're going to go off anyway. The Mail on Sunday reported that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have been briefed on this by the CIA and Dutch military intelligence. And allegations were made by other Westerners who joined ISIS, but these haven't been verified. The jihadi bride stereotypes were causing female ISIS recruits to be dangerously underestimated by global security services. You know, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest either, given our general attitude towards our ideas about women and their role complicitly in campaigns of a violent nature. But men and women emerging from the terrorist group's former territories have largely denied any wrongdoing or claimed they were coerced. And it's hard to verify anything. So there you go. And now ISIS, because it's so short on fighters, is giving women permits to fight in defense of the caliphate. So that's that. You wonder whether or not that was a motivation behind her leaving. She's pregnant and they've given her an assault rifle and said, you're going to have to defend us. So yeah, but Sajid Javid has been like getting some retroactive, I suppose, praise, you might call it, or not praise, but kind of like, oh, good job on that. You caught that one early. Good thing that worked out that way, like for stripping her of her citizenship when this stuff emerged. Now, Bangladesh has denied she's a dual national. So that's the big thing. Like, Bangladesh is refusing to acknowledge. They're like, she's yours, mate. She's not ours. And so on. So this is the trouble. So I was curious about like this kind of flip-flopping over Sajid Javid over the case of this whole thing, but also the fact that it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that she was actually more heavily involved in things than her other schoolmates, who I believe came back earlier, if I'm right.
No, I think I'm not sure if one of them is still alive, but I think one of them is definitely dead.
Right. Let me see where I can. I'm a Begum schoolmates. I don't know. Sharmina. I don't know why she's Sharmina in Wikipedia, but let me see. Classmates. They're much more likely to do that. This is back Al Jazeera. That there you go. No idea. Yeah, Khadija Sultana. What's her name? Let's see what happened to her.
Well, I mean, if you think of it, Sultana makes perfect sense as a Middle Eastern name because, you know, Sultan is is the equivalent of king, isn't it?
Let me see. The girls stole family jewelry to pay for their flight. Travel ban. Nothing else, just that they moved into the homes of their...
Yeah, from what I've heard, I believe one of them at least is dead. Because, I mean, you know, you have to understand they were in a war zone.
Sultana's family said they believed her to have died in an airstrike whilst planning to escape. Whether or not she actually was is shortly, killed in a Russian airstrike. There you go. But the other one, the other one was beaten to death for trying to escape.
Oh well. there you go.
So there you go.
You win some, you lose some. I mean, if you go to one of these places, which is, how shall we say, medieval, and has a tendency towards extreme violence, then I don't think you can really say, you can be totally surprised if you end up being beaten to death. I mean, this is the kind of thing that these people think is perfectly acceptable for non-believers and whatever. What they don't realize is how easy it is to be seen as a non-believer.
Yes, like everyone accusing everyone of being kafir. It's just horrendous. No,
what I would like to pull you up on, of course, is your reference to Sajid Javid.
Go on.
Because I believe the correct reference is Sajid Javid, the well-known menace, an enemy of freedom of expression in the UK.
Is that his full title?
Yes.
Do you want to add anything else in there?
Because, of course, that proposal that was published last week on protecting us from online harms.
Yes.
There were 2 signatures to that. One signature was from the Secretary for Culture, and the other signature was from Sajid Javid, who has been doing a lot of boasting about this, because he sees it as something to boast about to help him in his leadership bid to take over the Tories when Theresa May goes. So this is somebody who thinks that he sees himself as a potential leader, and he sees this as one of the things to brag about. So this is something seen among the political class in Britain as a good, an achievement. Whereas I guess to the most of us, it would look like an absolutely horrible Orwellian piece of
a totalitarian step in absolutely the wrong direction. And again, I have an article here. If you'd care to read the title when it comes up, British, are you ready?
The white paper on online harms is a global first. It has never been more needed. By John Norton. Yes, another enemy of free speech then. Yes, and who is writing in The Guardian, so we more than likely shouldn't be all too surprised.
Got to pick the craziest, basically launched by Jeremy Wright and Sajid Javid, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport.
Which, of course, was previously Sajid Javid's department. So, how much of this much of this work was already laid down under Sajid Javid, and then his successor basically just followed up, if you know what I mean. Meanwhile, Sajid Javid, as the Home Secretary, fully embracing it. So, yeah, I mean, he's clearly put his name to it. He sees this as something that he wishes to be seen as his work. So, by all means, yes, let's associate him with this. Let's make it quite plain to the public that this is Sajid Javid's doing.
Now, do you know any of the details of the white paper? Have you read it?
Well, it's a white paper. That means that it's not really laying out anything specific yet. It is not a law, so to speak. This is basically the proposal as to what they want to do. So right now, it's even more vague than a law would be, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read a number of white papers.
And I mean, I've not read the whole thing because after a few pages you lose the will to live. But yes, the sections that you read, they just seem terrifyingly familiar. Because yes, anybody who's basically been sort of following how the government kind of like to use certain language.
The government will establish a new statutory duty of care on relevant companies to take reasonable steps to keep their users safe and tackle illegal and harmful activity on their services.
Yeah, I think the big question that they basically wish to establish an authority who gets to make the decisions. Now, at the moment, it still isn't clear whether they wish this to be Ofcom or whether they wish to establish a new authority. So Ofcom is largely in charge of most of sort of media and communications and whatever. Whereas they may decide to establish a completely new authority. So rather than just have a new department in Ofcom, they may decide to set up something like the BBFC, which is the British Board of Film Classification, which I think in the 80s, I'm not sure, I think it might have been in the 80s, they changed their name from the British Board of Film Censorship.
Yes.
And they may well decide to set up something like that, but for the internet. And they would then effectively be able to, well, just issue edicts with which internet companies and social media platforms and whatever would have to comply.
It sounds like a certain union of which we may still be a part of in the coming months.
Well, you know, when it comes to Article 13 and whatever, I think we have to remember that a lot of that, you know, the copyright directive was about copyright, digital rights, things like that. Well, who has got the most powerful media in Europe? The British. Who has got the largest music industry? The British. It may well be that that sort of legislation may well have mainly been driven by Britain. It's just that when people obviously started screaming about it, that the British government just kept very quiet about it and just let everybody blame Europe.
I just, like, every single time I see this, I just go, you've shut down anything that isn't completely sanitized. And it's boring for a start, but it's also stagnant because, you know, all it takes is it's a culture of like watching absolutely everything you say, never exploring any new ideas,
what is
exploring anything edgy.
What is also worth pointing out is this sort of curious phenomenon, which I mean, the British have clung to. I think the British were the first to kind of come up against the conundrum. But since then, pretty much every jurisdiction in the world has done the same thing. It was a famous case. I think it was some chap called Perrin. He might actually have been French and be called Perrin, but who cares? In which it was effectively established in British law that the British courts, the British jurisdiction, is for the entire internet.
Of course.
So the way they define it is like this. If something can be downloaded here, so if something can be viewed here, it is therefore regarded as published here.
Right.
And because it is published here, it therefore falls under British law. And you have to understand that as technology grows more and more powerful, and particularly as more and more states dedicate more and more resources to creating these great firewalls like they've got in China, you know, the means may become available. I mean, by now, the calculating power and the amount of stuff they can save has become so much larger than it was just a few years ago. So there is the possibility that they might then decide, well, if it doesn't comply to British law, we may just try and block it by some means, even if that means we just block almost all the internet. Because, you know, one has clung to this ferociously, that one insists that everything is published in Britain. And this has led to some ludicrous court cases. So, for example, there was an Ukrainian oligarch who sued a Ukrainian newspaper,
Right.
For an article published in Ukrainian. But he sued them in London because he stood a better chance of winning here. So even though it was in a language nobody here understood, even though there was very little evidence that anybody in this country had ever viewed the article, even though clearly the two protagonists were from a completely different country, because it is technically deemed to have been published here, And because he fancied his chances here, he actually brought the lawsuit here. So it kind of gives you an idea of the absolute nonsense. I believe there are also some cases of British newspapers having been sued in France under French law. Because again, in France, they're now doing the same thing. Everything that is on the internet is published in France. And I think this is going to be one of the big questions of the future. How on earth do we untangle this? Because clearly, if you are a British newspaper and you've published you've published your newspaper here and you've put the article up onto the internet, you can't possibly be deemed to have published something in France. It's ridiculous. I mean, even more ludicrously, there was a chap who was hauled out of Heathrow Airport while he was traveling back to Australia. So he was coming from America, I believe, and he was going on to Abu Dhabi or something like that. But obviously he was he was still in the international section, just basically waiting to catch his next flight at Heathrow, and the police arrested him and obviously then took him into officially British territory rather than the international section beyond passport control, because there was a German extradition request, under the European arrest warrant.
Yeah.
And the reason the Germans had issued an arrest warrant was because he had published things which the Germans regard as Holocaust denial. Now, this was an Australian who had said something in America. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Who was then being charged by the Germans and was being dragged out of the international lounge in Heathrow. And you look at that and you just go, folks, you have to resolve this area of jurisdiction and internet, because that's ludicrous. Now, in the end, it turned out that the British refused to extradite him to Germany because they simply said, look, I'm sorry, but in our jurisdiction, this isn't even a crime.
Yeah.
And there is no way that we can do this.
Wherever you are on the internet.
Because if you allow for that, then, I mean, alcohol consumption is banned in Australia, in Saudi Arabia. So could somebody can somebody be arrested under an international arrest warrant in, I don't know, Dusseldorf because he was photographed drinking a pint in Miami?
I think we've discovered a way to get rid of Theresa May. That's all I'm saying.
But you can see what I mean. This is a mess. The idea that all the legal systems are insisting that they have jurisdiction. I mean, with the reason the Perrin case became so, or Perrin, whichever way it's pronounced, became so infamous, was because he had bought several adult websites while he was in America, and he had sought legal advice in America. And then when he came back to Britain, he was under British law deemed to be responsible for the content of those websites.
Right, and of course Britain has loads of kooky.
And over here, obviously, pornography this, pornography that. This is, material that can corrupt and deprave. I mean, these are not things that I'm putting on for theatrics. This is terminology in British law when it comes to obscenity.
I love British that it's taken less than an hour. We've been going less than an hour. You've mentioned the Romans.
Yep.
You've mentioned British porn laws.
Yes, of course. But yeah, I mean, this chap was arrested for effectively businesses he owned in America. And that's what established the entire sovereignty issue. That basically it was deemed that anything that could be seen in Britain, because of course he insisted, look, I'm sorry, I've bought this stuff in America, I'm a businessman. It's perfectly legal in America. I took legal advice. Everything is completely above board.
Yeah.
And Then they just basically said, oh, well, but catch-22, everything that is deemed downloadable, viewable here is deemed published here. So therefore you are publishing something that is not permitted to be published here in Britain, and you're in Britain, and we've got you.
I tell you what, I'll warm the cockles of your heart, Britisher. So Squire of Gothos in chat says, I'm giving jurisdiction of my heart to the fake accents. Do you have anything to weigh in on this, Taylor? You were being awfully quiet that evening.
I think this either we were too boring, or there are some technical issues at his end. But his icon disappeared 2 or 3 minutes ago.
I see. That's unfortunate. Let me see.
But no, as I say, with this jurisdiction thing, that is a major. It's a major headache, and at some point this has to be resolved. I believe because of certain libel laws here in Britain and whatever, and because of the British tendency to regard everything as our responsibility. Some years ago, I believe it was under Obama, the first various states started doing so, and then the federal government itself, I believe, actually brought forward some legislation which basically held American companies immune, so that we couldn't suddenly start. They couldn't be sued in British courts over this nonsense, because, as I say, because Ukrainian oligarchs can sue Ukrainian newspapers, it was kind of seen as, oh, well, the British, London will just become the courtroom of choice. And because the British basically will just accept everything, because they see everything as part of their jurisdiction, one then decided to protect American companies. So I think first various states said, if we get certain sort of legal demands from Britain, we will not enforce them against American companies. So yes, I think there has been some recognition that what is going on in Britain is a bit cloud cuckoo land. And I have said for years that it is necessary for the British Parliament to sort this matter out. But the British politicians will always say they don't have enough time. And the reason they don't have enough time is because they spend too much time banning upskirting. They talk about complete nonsense, stuff that is already illegal. They pass legislation that you're no longer allowed to set off atom bombs in Britain. I mean,
as if such a thing is commonplace occurrence. I can't go down the local shop without someone trying to nuke the area.
And I mean, I think one of my favourite ones with Tony Blair was when there's a law that was passed under his tenure that you're not allowed to assault workers of the Docklands Light Railway in the performance of their duties while repairing lines and whatever. So when they're working on the railway lines, you're not allowed to throw stones at them. And you go, so you're allowed to throw stones at anyone else?
Yeah, that's almost like the stupidity of doing something like regulating candle whips, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you sort of hear this stuff and you just go, well, that is why you don't have time to actually deal with, major problems. I mean, some of the really major problems, things like, yes, where does jurisdiction begin and where does jurisdiction end with internet? But also things like, people who have got dreadful diseases and end up going to Switzerland to be...
You mean Dignitas?
To go to Dignitas, yes. I mean, they've avoided that subject like the plague. So the actual big questions are not at all being tackled, and instead one is just filling it with complete flummery. and well, I mean, they're just completely worthless in that regard. Something has to be done about our political class.
I'll tell you what, let's move on, because we've been talking about this now.
Where did we start?
I was like, Good grief! We started with censorship laws, Sajid Javid.
Oh
and that was,
yes, Sajid
and that was-
Javid, online harm. Yes,
that was
sorry.
20 minutes ago. So,
Yes, sorry. I'm like a wind-up toy when it comes to censorship. You just basically you turn the key and then I just roll along and bang my little cymbals together.
So I'll tell you what. I'll catch us up with the last 3 super chats, and then we'll move on to something else. How about that? So Joel Kelly donates £2. Says not so obvious is gutted, not unlike Notre Dame. Dr. Martin Luther Pepe says, isn't dragged, hung, and quartered the traditional punishment for traitors? It's hung, drawn, and quartered, I think, is the traditional way of saying it, but yes. And Salad Fork says...
So technically it's hanged, isn't it? Not hung.
No, because they are not hanged. They are actually hung as part of the procedure.
Oh, well, I stand corrected.
Indeed. So it's slightly different. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. I tell you what, I'm going to get pulled up by chat now, and they're going to be like, "No, you're actually wrong," and the British is right. But I'm pretty sure that there is a distinction because they don't kill you with it, so he called it hung. Anyway, Salad Fork says, "Sounds like Sir Robert Peel needs to rise from the grave to repeal the porn laws this time. If we need to sacrifice a virgin, I suggest Theresa May."
Well, I think there's just a vast amount of laws that should be repealed, and censorship is just one area, but I think there's a huge area of law that just huge areas of law that should just go.
Let me see. People have been talking in chat about mainly about this cathedral, right? So the Notre Dame Cathedral, and it looks like someone said to me, the Paris Fire Brigade commander is saying that if the North Tower's fire can't be put out soon enough, it'll collapse and most of the building's going to go down. So really unfortunate that I suppose they'll be looking to mitigate as much
I'm
damage.
just wondering why the tower would collapse. That's what I can't quite understand.
I presume it's like it's covered in a lot of scaffolding. Like there's a new map out showing the top of the roof.
Well, I mean, I could well imagine that the roof in the tower will be wood. It will be supported by wooden beams and whatever. But as such, if you think of each tower as kind of an upright pipe built of stone.
Yes, but if you imagine how heavy the beams are, and if they start to fall because they break away at the side,
I'm really not sure that I'm confused as to what would threaten those towers. I'm not saying it's not so. I just don't quite understand because I mean they will be a significant stone weight of themselves, in themselves.
So here we go. We're getting responses from the chat, which says first, hanged, drawn, and quartered is correct, and secondly, the stonework is still held up by timber, and the heat will crack it and destroy the mortar, even if it doesn't, do anything else to it.
Well, I say that the fact that the heat might crack the stone, that I can understand. I don't believe that the stone will be held up by any wooden framework. I very much doubt that.
There may be some facades in there, which are mainly wood with a stone facade.
I mean, there might be something like that internally within tower. I mean, I wouldn't really see why one would beautify the internal, of the towers. But something like that could be. But as such, the towers themselves will be solid stone. They won't be held up by some kind of wooden structure. It's not like a black and white house.
Let me see. There's people saying that again, this is the thing which is causing more controversy is the the cause of the fire. Apparently, it was being renovated, so someone might have got a bit too handy with the angle grinder.
Well,
but Shinobi has just got in touch and said there was no construction scheduled that day, and it was closed at the time.
Precisely, it's the thing that worries me with this is that it would have been after working hours. I mean, they will go home. So even if there was work, this seems to actually have started sort of 6 o'clock, 6:30, something like that.
Here is here's a shot from a drone, which is overhead of the.
One of my main fears while the thing was going, while it was really blazing, was that the heat might be such that it would start buckling all that scaffolding. And if that then falls in, just the sheer amount of tonnage of metal that would come down, that would again have the capacity to do some structural damage, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But that seems to have managed to stay up. But you know, the fear I have is that this looks as if it was after hours. Now, there's a good possibility someone might have just left an electric generator on, forgot to turn it off. And, half an hour or an hour after they all left, it started the fire. Something like that is possible. But, as I say, the fact that the fire began after everybody really would have gone home, on any of the builders, so to speak, that to me seems a bit suspicious. And at the same time, you have to ask yourself, how well would anybody guard a scaffolding?
Mr. Spoon says British are confirmed as Notre Dame truther conspiracy theorists.
So that is. I really hope this was an accident. I really hope this was just something that went wrong, because if this was foul play, then we're all thinking the same thing. If this was foul play, was it terrorism?
Yeah, Binary Surfer, obviously. He says bets on Notre Dame being culturally enriched, and there's been a lot of that going around as well as to whether or not there is that. I think PJW released a Twitter video, one of those short ones.
Yeah. I think I saw. I think I know which one you're talking about.
Which was showing ha reactions on Facebook to the event, and they were all almost exclusively Mohammedan names.
Yeah.
It was that.
I think that is a really big. I think there's a really big worry if that were the case, because what kind of conclusions you draw then, I mean, heaven knows. Yeah. Because you can't protect everything. I mean, the police have already got more than enough of a headache of trying to stop people from being killed. But if you then also have to start thinking of guarding every building that is of any cultural or historic or religious significance, where does it end?
I'm certain the academic agent would make a case for private ownership, and the
of course.
Therefore, yes. Every single one of them would be profitable and would be able to hire private security. But Dr. Martin Luther Pepe says if Notre Dame was pieced, I will go on a crusade. And I think that's the big worry, particularly because obviously France is quite polarized when it comes to this stuff already. I wonder to what degree it will inflame tensions between the Muslim community and the...
I think everything depends on what emerges. As I say, if nothing emerges, if we stay as clueless as we are now, then I think it will just basically be deemed inexplicable and thus more than likely an accident.
It will be very clear, as with most of these things, whether it was arson afterwards, because you have to use accelerants, and it would be very obvious. But I tell you what, we're obviously overlooking one thing, as Mr. Gently Benevolent says. He says British are looking for answers and ignoring the obvious one. It was built by the French. As a true Brit, I'd have thought that would have been your first thought.
Well, then again, I mean, to what extent will it have been built by the French? Because when it comes,
how culturally French were they 850 years ago? Yes.
Well, when it comes to the Masons of the time, to what extent were they actually of one nationality, and to what extent were they more of an international pack?
The Gauls,
No. I actually mean, I actually mean the Masons who would have, because they wouldn't just, they wouldn't just arrive and then just build one thing. They might well, at one moment they might be working on a German dome, then the next moment they might be working on Notre Dame. They might not always be in the same place. There's nothing to say that it would be an entirely French outfit. It could actually be quite an international outfit. Would be, international for a medieval.
How long did it take to build? That's really the question.
I think something like 100 years or something like that. I mean, on the BBC they said 200, but I've read somewhere it was 100 years. But these things take a lot of time to heap up. Yes.
Let me see. It's one of those things where you basically pledge yourself and your children and their children to do it. It was built over let me see. No. Construction began in 1163 and was completed in 1345. So there we go. So just shy, like about 170 odd years, 172 or something like that. So quite an impressive construction. But the chat's telling me that it does appear that they managed to save all the artwork, treasure, artifacts, the sacraments, the crown of thorns, that sort of stuff that was stored there. Mm-hmm. So at least, even if you've lost the building, you've not lost some of the history that was contained within. But
that's one positive at least. Yes.
I mean, if you're going to have such a tragic event happen to a building, you'd rather lose some than not all. But yes, Henry VI was made King of France inside Notre Dame in 1431. Apparently, some interesting things there.
I don't know that much about sort of French kings and whatever.
Yeah, I reckon it was the previous gargoyles taking revenge on the new ones, because the new ones are made of plastic.
Sorry, what?
So when they decided to renovate it, they budgeted it out at $180 million, and like there were a number of broken gargoyles all over the building, and they were going to replace them with plastic gargoyles.
Yes, that doesn't sound good.
No. Have you gone and seen the great plastic gargoyles of France, British?
Yeah, no, that doesn't have a good ring to it. I guess one of the reasons one might do it in plastic is possibly not just cost. It may also be because
it's about weathering, isn't it?
I think much of the upper structure was fairly unsafe, so that they had to take quite a few spires down and whatever. I mean, that's why they began renovation work again. Because some of the people in charge of it were saying, look, you don't quite realize how desperate some of this is. So it may well be that putting plastic figures up would also, be much lighter. I think.
Yeah, we're not going to have any hot fuzz moments. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, precisely. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to get at. So.
I mean, the stream's already been demonetized, so there's no need to be coy, British. If you want to talk about things dropping off and splitting people's heads like melons, that's entirely fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, one tries to avoid being too graphic, but yes, that's what I was actually trying to get at.
Like a watermelon going everywhere. Mr. MacDaddy Poontang says Britain can lend France one of our cathedrals if they want. We've got a fair few lying around. So we recommend Lincoln Cathedral being flown over there, do you reckon?
Actually, when it comes to sort of cathedral builders and things like that, the British apparently had quite an export of artisans. So because we had so much building of cathedrals and whatever going on, I read somewhere once that, we had a sort of a surplus of workers who were able to do that. Who then would go to continental Europe and kind of lend a hand, if you know what I mean.
Well, it was clearly that government subsidies created a surplus of stonemasons who then had to ply their trade over abroad because there was no work for them here. So they went and actually Our immigrants took other stonemasons' jobs. That was
Well, precisely. Yes, that was it. Yeah, and then luckily the European Union came along and resolved all those issues.
Oh yes, of course, and destroyed the fishing industry and the construction industry and most of our manufacturing. But let's not talk about that. I just let me see. Trudeau just tweeted, "Canadians are thinking of our friends in France as you fight this devastating fire. So soy, no poetry, just bland." I mean, it's just the equivalent of thoughts and prayers, isn't it?
Along those lines, yes.
People saying that this is clearly a plot by the Grand Mufti to establish Notre Mosque when it finally comes around.
Well, I mean, I saw a tweet earlier from what's it called, Chris Reagan, who sort of said, "Oh well, chances are it's just going to be turned into a mall or something now that it's burnt down." And I sort of thought, "Well, I don't think you quite get it. No, they're going to rebuild this."
You reckon?
Well, there's absolutely no way that the French are going to let Notre Dame fall to ruin. Yeah, it's going to be rebuilt, no doubt.
Yes, in brutalist architecture.
No, they are going to rebuild it stone for stone. And I would say, if the billionaires of the world perhaps want to make a name for themselves, here's their chance.
People are telling me to explain my automation Ludditery or Ludditery.
Ludditery, yeah.
I presume in there. I can only imagine that's to do with, I made a video where I said that automation may end up we may end up in a state where automation accelerates to the point where we can't keep up. I said it was unlikely, but it might happen, and that if it was going to happen, it would be a result of rampant experiment capitalism. Sorry.
Has this got anything to do with what we've been talking about so far? Because
no, I don't.
I can't draw a connection to the moment.
It's not really. I'm just spitballing here because someone pinged me. Anyway, I'll that's for another time.
Is this by chance one of AA's attack hamsters?
It wouldn't surprise me. Attack hamsters. That's amazing. I'll tell them you said that.
Oh, I've been calling them attack hamsters for some time.
Strong. All right, so we'll get back on topic. So Anthony Keane says a terrorist has been jailed recently in France for a plot to attack Notre Dame, which doesn't surprise me. If I, in fact, because Sarah keeps up to date with a lot of this stuff, and if I find the right post, she was talking about. Nope, we were talking about culturally enriched knives in Calais. And what else have we got here? She was saying, yes. So ISIS tried to blow up the Rialto Bridge last year. They tried to blow up St. Paul's Basilica at the Vatican before Christmas. This is very possible. It better not be, but it's very possible that this is quite a malicious attack. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Mighty Balzac says the famous Mason Jimmy of Nail. Do you know Jimmy of Nail? I don't know.
No.
This is just a random super chat. I don't know.
It sounds like it sounds like an elaborate Geordie joke.
Jimmy of Nail.
Jimmy Nail. No.
No, I've lost. I'm afraid. Jimmy of Nail.
No, as I say, I have no idea. The only thing is that I could imagine would be that it's some kind of Jimmy Nail joke that I don't understand. But moving on.
Moving on, you presume. And in fact, I don't know what it is today. I'm really off. I apologize to everyone. That I've been so quiet and I seem to be so disconnected.
Yeah, by the way, here this might be of interest because I'm just seeing on Twitter here. Hephaestus Forge points out that the Cutty Sark burnt down because a cleaner left a vacuum cleaner that was faulty on.
Oh, I see. So you reckon someone might have left a piece of equipment on, and then they've
Yeah,
all
yeah.
gone home
As I
for the
say, I mean,
weekend?
that's what I said before. I could well imagine, that could be possible. That someone left a piece of equipment on when they went home, because this was after working hours. So if somebody had some kind of electrical equipment up there that wasn't switched off, something like that could have caused this.
Chat,
And
sorry, just to jump in. Chat has elucidated us on Jimmy Nail, saying he played the part of an English builder in Germany once. So there you go. But carry on.
yeah, that was Wiedersehen Pet. That was the TV series. Yes.
Yes.
And since then, he then became a singer and everything, and had quite a big hit, I think, in Britain with what's it called, Big River, wasn't it?
I have no idea. It's all before my time.
What can I say? These young
I
whippersnappers who
would-
have no idea of anything. It's
I would
terrible.
be very happy if negligence burnt down Notre Dame as opposed to anything malicious. Just because I don't particularly want to see more violence. But I'd also like, then of course you can seek legal recompense. Obviously, whoever did that is going to
Yeah, you can seek legal recompense. Well, in that case, it better
some
be.
poor builder is there with like 100.
Yeah, in that case, the building work better have been carried out by Google.
Yes, it's like, so you owe us $1 billion, it's like €1 billion or whatever. It's I don't know. Can you imagine like being there? What did you do? I left the kettle on inside the renovation works I built, burnt down.
Well, then again,
$1,000 memorial.
if recent communication of ours with Americans is anything to go by, other nations other than the British don't know electric kettles, so it must be something else.
Of course not. Anyways, as I say, I apologize for this fake accents being quite so short and me being quite so quiet, and my guest, it turns out, bless him, poor tail feature, was falling asleep. Also had a bit of technical difficulties and disconnected, and then was just like, I'm shattered, I'm going to bed, because he's only just got in from work. So I apologize for that. I would stay longer. I have nothing left to talk about, and unfortunately, I don't know what it is. Maybe I blew all my motivation on my stream earlier about Discord and European elections and MEP.
You were online earlier. I wasn't aware.
Oh yes, I did a 20-minute segment on Sargon. Have you heard about this? The him planning.
Oh yes, his standing for European election. Yes, I've heard about that.
But,
I mentioned it in the week that was. Yes.
Yes, but BuzzFeed have attacked him today.
Oh yes, I saw that. Yes.
Yes, they said that his 15,000 strong Discord server was full of anti-Semitism, white supremacy, and hate, and then they could find a grand total of 6 examples, and contained within 2 conversations over a 3-week period, in a server of 15,000. That contained anything remotely dodgy, and the moderators, including Scrump, if anyone's familiar with him, the kind of famous Twitter troll, actually had to bring one of the reporters up to task because they had banned the members who had been spouting this, and they'd been claiming that this was all stuff that was like from today's date, etc. But he was like, one, we opened the server up so that people could join for activism, and this also opened the door to trolls, and the moderators have been working, almost like it's an actual job to remove as much of this kind of crap as possible. And then secondly, the only stuff that you've been able to find from like prior to the last couple of days where we've been removing everything is this one conversation from a banned member. Like, I mean, really? Can you really? Is that the best you can do?
Yeah, I think this is from people who have never tried to moderate anything on the internet, and therefore don't quite understand the chaotic nature of it. It is a bit like sort of trying to herd chickens, isn't it?
There's also a lot of their examples are just equivalent of what you might describe as very edgy internet humor. Like, it's very evidently, self-evidently not serious. It's very satirical. Anyway, I've done a stream on that earlier. It's about 20 minutes long. If you're interested, people can go
Well,
watch.
I actually got talking about this, I actually got a laugh out of Sargon yesterday when I pointed him to the thumbnail of the week that was that I'd done. Because obviously with him standing for office, I sort of decided to have him on the thumbnail. So I thought, well, how do I put Sargon on the thumbnail for, regarding the EU elections? So I found an old picture of Screaming Lord Sutch,
Yes,
the
yes,
founder of the Monster Raving Loony Party.
I can see it now. Yeah,
And he always liked to turn up in a rather colourful gear with a giant rosette pinned to him and whatever, sort of vote such. And he had a sort of big megaphone, which also had a thing on vote such. So obviously I changed that to Sargon in both cases and changed the face to Sargon's. And that tickled him quite a bit.
Here we are. Yes, with a vote Sargon, the giant vote Sargon rosette as well. There you go. Now you know what you want to do, people who, when we finish this stream, you can go and watch the week that was straight away. It's worth
Yeah.
it.
Also, I also had a bit of a go at Donald Trump. After which, of course, immediately people started telling me that, oh, no, he wasn't wrong. He was playing 4D chess again,
We're soon going to reach 5D backgammon. So
yes, yeah, precisely. It was because, the Julian Assange thing, he had suddenly never heard of WikiLeaks.
yes,
And I wasn't much amused at that, put it like that.
no, there's
I think you already saw my Twitter reaction earlier.
yeah, a little bit of a go, didn't you? Anyways, well, thank you very much for joining me, Britisher. Again, sorry everyone.
It's been an honor and a privilege.
Sorry it's been so quiet. Next week, I hope to bring many more guests and a more engaged and active myself. But I'm hoping as well to put out a decent amount of content this week. I'm going to test things. Give me if you do watch my stuff apart from Fake Accents Unite, please give me plenty of feedback on that. I'm trying a couple of new things, and I'm curious what you think. But thank you very much, and good night.
Toodle pip.